Начали кричать, избивать меня по ребрам.
Imagine the sounds of howling winds and distant metallic clanks. Being exiled to a place so desolate, you'd swear the Night King was lurking right outside your cell door. Think solitary confinement isn't extreme enough? In these Russian prisons, you can forget about cozy bunk beds and steamy oatmeal breakfasts. Survival alone is a privilege. Polar Owl, Black Dolphin, Polar Wolf, Fire Island. These are not names of twisted horror films, but rather the inescapable fortresses hidden in the Russian tundra's perpetual gloom. And if you think you're tough because you endured one winter without a decent heater, well, you haven't faced minus 60-degree Fahrenheit blasts that can freeze your eyelashes off in seconds. I'm talking about remote facilities where ex-inmates, like political dissident to Vladimir Putin's regime, Alexei Navalny, have spilled gut-wrenching stories of forced standing in place in the bitter cold, brutal intimidation tactics, and claustrophobic isolation cells. And yes, in these places, your daily to-do list might include try not to get frostbite and avoid getting hosed with ice water. Even the guards seem haunted by the shadows that linger behind razor wire fences. Whew. Today, we're plunging into Russia's deadliest prisons, where even a minor slip can lead to an unmarked grave. Buckle up and keep your wits about you. Want to know how to not freeze, starve, or lose your mind if you wind up in any of these hellholes? Stick around as we find out exactly which prison forces its inmates to stand for 16 hours straight, which Arctic nightmare douses prisoners with ice-cold water, and who survived almost 300 days in solitary confinement. Black Dolphin Prison, officially known as Penal Colony No. 6, sits in Sololetsk, right on the Russian-Kazakhstan border. It houses around 700 of the most dangerous criminals in the country, including murderers, terrorists, serial killers, and cannibals, all serving life without parole. When you're transferred here, say goodbye to any sense of freedom or dignity. Welcome to your new home. And sorry, there are no dolphins here. Guards immediately blindfold newcomers so they can't memorize any hallway or corridor layout. Then, they're bent over at the waist, hands cuffed behind them, and yanked upward in a position bound for back problems. This is done to keep prisoners disoriented and totally under control. And that's not the worst part. At Black Dolphin, you'll need to stand the test of time. Literally. Inmates must stand during waking hours, around 16 to be precise, and can't lean on the walls or stretch out on their bunks. Guards patrol every 15 minutes, presumably to make sure nobody's dozing off or practicing their best Shawshank Redemption escape plan. And if you think you can catch a break in the recreation yard, guess again. They let you exercise in a large cage for about 90 minutes while they tear your cell apart, searching for contraband. Real nice. You might ask, why the name Black Dolphin? Rumor has it that a sculpture of a black dolphin stands at the prison entrance, greeting you with a cheery, abandon all hope vibe. Honestly, Flipper has never looked so menacing. But it's the inmates you'll really need to worry about. Let's introduce Exhibit A of pure nightmare fuel, Vladimir Nikolaev, the cannibal killer of Novocheboksarsk. In 1997, he killed 2 men, one of them after a drunken argument that escalated into lethal violence. What followed veered into downright horror. As he dismembered his victim, he decided on a whim to boil and fry the flesh. Initially sentenced to death, his punishment was later changed to life in prison when Russia issued a moratorium on capital punishment in 1999. Technically, you can still be put to death, but why waste all that prisons like this have to offer? During an interview with National Geographic, Vladimir candidly recounted how he first tasted human flesh. He claimed he disliked it boiled, so he turned to frying it in a pan. Even more disturbing, he slipped this gruesome kangaroo meat to his own family, feeding dumplings laced with human remains to his unsuspecting wife and children. Believe it or not, it gets even worse. He reportedly sold around 5 kilograms of flesh at a local open market. His reign of terror finally ended when a suspicious customer took the odd-tasting meat to a doctor for testing, discovering it was undeniably human. Being locked up with a man like that is about as comforting as a roommate wanted ad from Hannibal Lecter. If you want to stay sane and uneaten here, then here are some survival tips. Stay physically active. In a place where you're forced to stand for most of the day, you don't have a choice. But try to maintain some core strength. That might help you endure the constant strain. Be observant and respect personal space. In a high-tension environment full of violent offenders like Vladimir Nikolaev, the slightest perceived disrespect can trigger conflict. Avoid confrontation unless it's absolutely necessary. I'd tell you to keep your head down, but with the blindfold transfers, that's mandatory anyway. And if you're hooked so far, be sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more gripping survival stories. Now, if you thought Black Dolphin was as close to hell on Earth as you could find, how about being locked away north of the Arctic Circle, where the average winter day feels like you're trapped in an industrial freezer? Yes, the official name is FKU-IK3, but inmates call it the Polar Wolf. This prison in Karp can hold over 1,000 convicts, and it specializes in taking harshness to another level. You'd expect a maximum security gulag in sub-zero conditions to at least have decent heating, right? Think again. Temperatures can plunge as low as minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, yet inmates are often forced to stand outside in thin clothing for 30 minutes or more, forbidden to so much as clasp their hands for warmth. If one prisoner dares to move, guards punish the entire group by blasting them with a water cannon, turning frigid air into an instrument of torture. The horrors don't let up in the warmer months either. Swarms of mosquitoes and biting flies descend, and prisoners risk another soaking if they try to swat away the insects. Cold water or mosquitoes? That's a tough call. Look, I get that punishment is the point, but just throw them a bone, you know? At least slap some painted radiators on those walls like some of the other Russian prisons on our list. Polar Wolf doesn't just rely on cold to break you. Solitary confinement cells, often described as punishment boxes, are frequently used. Opposition figure Alexei Navalny, arguably Russia's most well-known political prisoner, reportedly spent almost 300 days in one of these cells with zero access to the outside world. That's nearly 10 months of total isolation. The mental toll from that alone is enormous. According to the American Psychological Association, prolonged solitary confinement can lead to depression, hallucinations, and a slew of other psychological disorders. In 2021, Navalny, the famed political adversary of Vladimir Putin, returned to Russia after surviving a poisoning attack in Germany, only to be immediately arrested and locked away. He cited this was due to his failure to report to authorities while recovering from the poison in the hospital there. If this wasn't enough, an additional 9 years was added to his already ongoing 2.5-year prison sentence. His letters described his daily routine: forced labor, frequent cell checks, and zero tolerance for anything resembling defiance. In his 2024 memoir, he detailed the constant psychological pressure. Guards would whisper threats through the door, snatch away letters from supporters, and limit any meaningful human contact. He also staged a prolonged hunger strike to protest inadequate medical care and demanded that an independent doctor see him for severe back and leg pain. As for the authorities, they shrugged it off, letting him waste away. And then, in 2023, Navalny received an additional 19-year sentence on extremism charges, ensuring he never tasted freedom. Sadly, in February 2024, his sentence was cut short when Navalny died in prison. His diaries, later smuggled out and published in his book Patriot, exposed the prison's relentless psychological assaults. The diaries mention everything from guards screaming at random intervals throughout the night to freezing showers used as intimidation. The chilling part? Navalny revealed that guards would use sleep deprivation tactics on prisoners for weeks on end. That alone is enough to break even the toughest minds. Imagine trying to hold a hunger strike in sub-zero temperatures. That's like playing extreme hardcore mode in real life. Talk about willpower. Surviving here is about adapting to constant surveillance. Accept that you're always being watched. Practice mindfulness to manage stress. Slow, deliberate breathing can keep panic attacks at bay. Also, a little respect towards guards, without crossing the line into betrayal with fellow inmates, may earn you the occasional courtesy. Like an extra blanket. But watch your back, because alliances shift quickly in these conditions. Trust me, in the polar wolf, an extra blanket could go a long way. The prison outfits here are not exactly built for the weather, and that's intentional. But you'll be praying for more than an extra blanket in our next frozen hellhole. Welcome to Polar Owl Prison, aka IK-18, or as I like to call it, the Siberian Soul Crusher. Tucked away in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug, it sits in an unforgiving Arctic environment that punishes you for simply existing. Temperatures can plummet to minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit, and the region experiences months of polar night where the sun barely peeks over the horizon. The original intent was to keep convicts in a place so remote that even James Bond would have trouble waltzing out. Reality check, escape attempts are almost non-existent, thanks to the lethal climate. This remote fortress is reserved for some of Russia's most notorious criminals. Inmates are confined to cells that offer little defense against the biting cold. While some rely on small floor radiators that barely cut through the chill, others are left with nothing but mock radiators painted on the walls, visual illusions against a very real freeze. Perched 37 miles north of the Arctic Circle in the village of Karp, it's almost impossible to reach, let alone escape. Reports cite unbearable cold, meager food, unsanitary conditions, and constant beatings, forging a regime designed to break the human spirit. Multiple ex-inmates revealed the use of extreme torture methods here, even worse than water hosing, including brutal beatings and sexual abuse.
Руки связали за спиной, ноги между собой. Начали кричать, избивать меня по ребрам, по почкам, по голове, ногами.
They described it as torture designed to break your spirit as much as your body.
Один из них начал снимать с меня штаны. Я, соответственно, сразу сказал: остановитесь, мне еще сидеть, не ломайте мне жизнь. Я все подпишу, все, что вы от меня просите. Только не делайте этого и все.
Several studies have indicated prolonged exposure to such conditions can lead to severe post-traumatic stress disorder, often haunting prisoners long after release, if they survive at all. An incident exposed in 2018 from a Yaroslavl penal colony provided a haunting glimpse into a broader pattern that may well exist at isolated facilities like Polar Owl. 18 prison officials tortured Yevgeny Makarov, triggering investigations, suspensions, and arrests. Activists warn these abuses are hardly confined to one colony, especially where reports of torture often go unheard. Lawyers who dare challenge such cruelty, like Irina Biryakova, who had to flee Russia with her daughter after receiving death threats, risk severe reprisals. Though the Yaroslavl case sparked official outrage, many fear that at prisons like Polar Owl, hidden acts of brutality remain shrouded in Arctic isolation. Surviving the brutal reality of a prison like Polar Owl is all about building mental and physical resilience. Preserve body heat as much as possible. Layer up with anything available, including blankets, spare clothing, even newspaper. Preventing body heat loss is essential in this environment. Equally as important is the art of mental survival. Establish a routine, push-ups, simple chores, counting bricks, to fight hopelessness. As Maslow's hierarchy of needs suggests, a sense of control, however small, helps you maintain sanity. This is Russia's Alcatraz, but officially, it's Vologodski Pjatak. It's a high-security penitentiary where terrorists, crime bosses, and other dangerous inmates serve life sentences. Encircled by icy waters, it's been nicknamed Fire Island. A cruel twist given the frigid reality. Escaping here is about as likely as winning the lottery twice. Originally a military detention site, this prison was later converted into a holding pen for criminals too volatile for mainland facilities. During winter, the lake freezes over, forcing guards to use snowmobiles and specialized transport for supplies. Overcrowding remains a serious concern. Cells meant for 2 inmates sometimes have 3 or 4 crammed into them, fueling constant tension. Picture living on a wind-whipped rock with hundreds of violent offenders. Not exactly a tourist hotspot. Food rations are thin, so inmates barter cigarettes for table scraps. Sanitation? Think hole-in-the-floor toilets and no privacy. Human Rights Watch has repeatedly condemned conditions here, calling them torturous and unfit for any modern correctional purpose. Even the toughest can't ignore a perpetual sewage stench when you can't flush your cell toilet. But it's who you'll end up with that you should be really worried about. Like Fire Island's most feared inmate, Andrei Golovichev, known as the apartment maniac. Between 1996 and 2000, he murdered at least 14 victims across Russia, tricking people to gain entry into their homes. After a cafe waitress rejected him, he brutally stabbed her and slit her throat. Despite multiple arrests, he exploited legal loopholes until his final capture in 2000. Yikes. I would not want to bunk with this guy. Survival tips: know your surroundings. Even if you never intend to flee, memorize your cell block's layout. In a place where someone like the apartment maniac could be lurking, ignorance is lethal. Know which corridors lead where and who runs the show in each cell block. That mental map could save your skin. Another handy survival tip: learn the ropes of trading in prison. In a place with scarce resources, bartering items like soap or warm clothing can be your lifeline. But don't promise what you can't deliver. Sure, you might daydream about a slick, Hollywood-style prison break, but real life doesn't come with endless ammo and choreographed takedowns. The grim truth is, if Fire Island claims you, there's a good chance no one outside these walls will remember your name. So, if you're thinking of committing a crime in Russia, I hope this episode has changed your mind. These prisons are clearly unsafe human rights disasters, despite brave efforts to change them. Even famous athletes aren't immune to Russia's prison realities. WNBA star Brittany Griner spent almost 10 months detained in a penal colony for alleged drug charges. She's since been freed in a high-profile prisoner swap, but her brief stay peeled the curtain back on subpar medical care, minimal contact with family, and intense work requirements. And if that's what a celebrity endured, imagine the plight of average Russians or lesser-known foreigners stuck in these places. Hard pass. If you thought these prisons were bad, imagine bunking with a room full of El Salvador's most sadistic gangsters. At Seacot Supermax Prison, you'll be stuck with tens of thousands of them under one terrifying roof. Yeah, I don't think I'd last a minute in here. Until next time, keep warm, keep alert, and keep watching How to Survive.